border war. Fans called it Moonshine Throwdown. I think that's the best rivalry name, an unofficial name, but the best rivalry name I've come across.
Yeah, unofficial that should become official soon enough.
Embrace it.
Grant Wells in the gun, takes the snap, takes the handoff, he takes off left, and he is all by his lonesome. Nobody within 10 yards, and Wells waltzes in for the touchdown. Marshall 16, Appalachian State 7. Grant Wells 12 yards for the score.
Next play, I love it, Brew. Liberty versus Western Kentucky. Terrell Pigram throws it up to Craig Bird Jr., who catches it over the defender for the touchdown. Woo! That's the way to get up there, boy.
Welcome back to the Moonshine Throwdown Podcast. I got Trace with me. We're going to recap Marshall's East Division win over Florida Atlantic, just Florida Atlantic's second game of the season. They did look pretty good, though. You could tell that they were throwing some new things at the Herd. The Herd was making a lot of in-game adjustments. There's a lot of coaching up on the sidelines going on, but ultimately the Herd comes out with the victory. I won't say it was convincing, but I won't say it wasn't convincing either. It just convinced me of different things. It wasn't a convincing win in the fashion that they just went out and dominated from beginning to end, but it did drive home some things that I thought I knew about this team. So let's talk about that. Trace, FAU was pretty tough, especially in the get-go. From the outset, they did a pretty good job of bottling up Marshall's run to start things a little bit. The pass game was okay. You know, it just wasn't like the super lethal Marshall defense or offense that we had seen. Defense was like we expected them to be, even with a lack of game film and not really knowing who was going to do what and actually who was going to trot out and play for FAU. But they did a really good job. So let me bring you in here. And talk to me about the game, what you saw. I'm sure you were there. I was not there. But talk to me about what you saw during the game and your feelings leading in and during and all that good stuff. And then we'll talk some general stats.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's like kind of what Doc said in the postgame. Eventually, this team's going to have a game where you have to grind it out. I mean, I think every great team has to have that. You can't just win by 30 points every week. You have to have a game where you have to actually pull it out and grind one out. And this was that game. I mean, FAU, for all the attrition and player depth questions that they had heading into this game, they also had a couple of advantages that I didn't even think about. I mean, they literally had a month to prepare for this game.
Yep.
Like, I mean, they have prepared for this game for like weeks and weeks and weeks, and they've been able to scout Marshall while they've been playing, and they showed that out there on the field because defensively they stacked the box. They stacked it even more than Louisiana Tech did, and they knew Marshall's top two receivers, well, at least their number one receiver, two of their best receivers were out. Brock Thompson is their number one receiver. They were both out. And then, of course, in the secondary for Marshall, their best secondary player, Najee Johnson, was out again. So, like, there was a few things Marshall had going against them as well. So it's not – I mean, and that's what I was thinking, too, is even with FAU's player attrition issues, I still think that team that they walked out there yesterday could probably still finish – easily second in the East Division, easily. So, like, I mean, it's not like they were playing with a bunch of coaches and high school players. They just got off the street. I mean, they still had a pretty quality team put out there on the field. They played really well. That's what I tweeted. They played really well, and you know, Marshall had to adjust. And for the most part, they did that. I mean, second half they had their first deficit of the season, and it lasted less than 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And it was right back at it. A big touchdown to R.D. Henry from Grant Wells, and that was it. So, like, they did a really good job of bouncing back. They had to finally have some adversity in the game, at least later in the game, third quarter, and they were able to show why that they are the superior team, like they pretty much always are against FAU. So, I mean, really good game. Well, I mean, I don't know if I'd call it a really good game, but it was a very good game in the sense that it's probably going to help them eventually down the road.
Yeah, it was character building. They learned a little bit about themselves in this game. They learned that they could play from behind, even if it did only take 1 minute and 48 seconds to regain the lead. But I want to point out, leading into that field goal drive for FAU, I was out mowing the yard listening to the radio call when that was going on, and Marshall had FAU in like a 3rd and 27, and FAU ended up converting that because of 2 penalties back-to-back on Marshall, and then they were able to gain yardage enough to convert and get a field goal out of that, which is basically insane. So the reason that FAU goes ahead at that point, set 9-7, is because of penalties. I mean, if you don't make one or two of those penalties, that drive doesn't end in a field goal. So just bad luck there for Marshall. A little bit of losing focus for a second, and it allowed FAU to take the lead. And that's the type of thing moving forward that you don't want to see, because if you get in a really, really tight game and something like that happens late in the game and you don't have a lot of time to hopefully come back, that one could bite you. So just something to, take note of, that it does happen. This team's not playing perfectly, and those little things that seem insignificant at the time, could down the road be something major. But no harm, no foul. Marshall has now trailed an entire 1 minute and 48 seconds on the entire season. And you saw the big play capability of when they went down. Like you said, Artie Henry gets the big touchdown reception. So, it is what it is. Her defense continues to roll, only giving up 86 yards rushing on the game for against the Owls. Still have not allowed a 100-yard rusher. Still have not allowed 100 yards to a team in 2020. Still an amazing stat that continues to go along. Marshall, you mentioned, wins again and now pushes their all-time record to 7-1 against FAU, which is one of those. If Marshall was 7-1 against an East Division team, I don't think many people right off the bat would go, it's FAU. It's FAU. Just because FAU's been pretty competitive over the last few years, and they fielded some good quality teams. But you would tend to think like, okay, they're probably 7-1 against Old Dominion or 7-1 against FIU, but no, it's 7-1 against the Owls. You mentioned the adversity. You talked about Willie Johnson being out. You talked about Brock Thompson being out. You talked about Naza Johnson being out. How about this one? Derek Pitts ejected early in the game, so the Herd's down three safeties. Terrible targeting call.
Terrible.
I do not agree with that. I mean, I saw the replay several times, and yeah, he's going down to make a tackle, but it's one of those, like, if you're already in the motion of tackling and the ball carrier lowers his head as well, how is that your fault for going helmet to helmet? It just, it's one of those things. So it was bad luck for Pitts. Good news for Marshall is that happened in the first half, so he will be back for FIU. Let's talk about those four big indicators: yardage, time of possession, first downs, and turnovers. Marshall outgains FAU by a pretty fair margin, 385 to just 234 for the Owls. Although the Owls outpossessed Marshall by nearly 7 minutes, almost 7 minutes, about 6.5 minutes. 33-12 for the Owls, 26-48 for the Herd. Marshall gets one more first down than the Owls, 18-17, and the Herd loses the turnover battle 2-1. But let's be fair, that's really 1-1 because one of those interceptions was final play of the half when they were basically out of field goal range, and you had to take a shot to the end zone. Just resulted in an interception. Wasn't a big deal. Good win, I guess you could say. Like I said, not convincing, 20-9. Marshall was favored by like 14 points or something coming into this game. We knew that probably really wasn't how it was going to play out, but Herd's 5-0, 3-0 in conference. They get that all-important tiebreaker over Florida Atlantic. They have the one against Western Kentucky right now. So, the games are winding down, Trace, and as long as the Herd keeps winning, it's really starting to look like they could rep the Conference USA in the title game, and if they string a few more together, they might be hosting that bad boy. So it's not out of the realm of possibility to kind of start talking about that a little bit without putting the cart before the horse. We're just getting to that stage in the game now. So let's talk about some individual stats, and then we'll get to grades, and I know that's your favorite part.
Always.
Grant Wells had a pretty decent day. 18 of 31 through the air, 251 yards, 2 touchdowns, 2 interceptions. Like we said, one really is just, it's going to go in the stat column, but it didn't mean anything at the end of the half. 63.4 QBR. Brendan Knox goes over 100 yards for the 4th straight game, 25 carries, 101 yards on the ground. No touchdowns on the ground, but he did have 2 receptions for 55 total yards and a receiving touchdown that went for 58 yards. Pretty cool play there. I saw that. It was kind of just a dump off, and pass rushers coming in on Grant Wells. He found Knox, and Knox took to the house. Pretty good play. Corey Gammage, your leader in the clubhouse in both receptions and yardage this week. 6 catches, 79 yards, 13.1 yards per catch. And Artie Henry, 5 catches, 75 yards, and that 1 touchdown, good for 15 yards per reception. Tavante Beckett is the man again on defense. 13 total tackles. 2 of those solo, a half a sack, 1.5 tackles for loss, and 2 quarterback hurries. How about Joshua Bowers, a junior DB pushed into action because of some injuries and because Pitts gets ejected, forced into more action than he probably was planning on getting today, came out with an 11 tackle performance, 6 of those solo. Great game by Josh Bowers. Brandon Drayton, another solid game, 9 tackles, 6 of those solo, and a quarterback hurry. And Darius Hodge doing what Darius Hodge does. 8 tackles, 2 solo, 1 sack, 2 tackles for loss, 3 quarterback hurries. All in all, the Herd defense racks up 5 sacks, 9 tackles for loss, and 12 quarterback hurries on the game. What do you like about what you saw, both offensively and defensively, I guess, and then we'll get into these grades.
Well, defensively, it was just more of the same. I mean, really, really good game. I mean, honestly, this might be one of the most – it might not immediately come to your mind of thinking, this is their best defensive performance of the year, but it was one of the very best because for one big reason, they were on the field a lot longer than they're used to being on it. I mean, Marshall's offense is usually able to really kind of work the clock and control the time of possession like they've been doing the last 2-3 games, but not this game. I mean, they were about, like you said, almost -7 in time of possession. Defense was out there a lot this game. They lost Derek Pitts mid the game. They didn't have Nazeeh Johnson again. They had to play a couple guys that normally wouldn't play that much, and they still went out there, held them to 9 points. I mean, really impressive performance. I mean, the pass rush was just spectacular again. They were hashtag grabbing sacks all day long. Just more of the same stuff with them. It was really, really good stuff. I mean, it seems like every time they sent pressure, it either got there, rattled the quarterback, or they got him down. I mean, it was just a constant. Sometimes they would blitz everybody. They would almost blitz everybody. And, they took advantage of that. Really good defensive performance. I mean, excellent, really. And then offensively, it left a lot to be desired in certain aspects. They only scored 20 points. Had some – they put together some drives. They had a good number of total yards. But they had to settle for field goals a couple times. Couple drives stalled out here and there. They didn't quite finish as well as they had been doing. Their third down conversions was not nearly as good as it had been. So I mean, the offense isn't going to be great every week. No, it doesn't matter who it is. It's not going to be great every week. So I mean, we'll chalk this up as maybe a little bit of an off day for the offense, but they were still able to run the ball effectively, about 4.5 yards a carry. Even though FAU was stacking the box like no other. They put 8 guys in the box almost like every other play. I mean, they knew. Well, and that was the other thing somebody said too, is that they knew Brock Thompson was out, and they knew Willie Johnson was out. And, that's obviously Brock Thompson's the number 1 receiver statistically heading into this game. And they were able to stack the box because they didn't think they could beat him as much through the air. But give credit to Wells, even though he played a little bit erratic at times, he still managed to really go deep on him a few times. Corey Gammage stepped up again. Artie Henry with the big touchdown again. Both of those guys are really coming on strong. So Grant Wells played well. He had 1 interception that was kind of just a throwaway, and then he had 1 that was just a bad throw into triple coverage. But, I mean, the offense was still okay. It was still okay to pretty good. I mean, it could have been a lot better, but it's not going to be great every week. So, overall, though, I mean, you got to be happy with the win, obviously, especially that it came over FAU, and Marshall fans don't like FAU much these days. So, good win.
Yeah, good win. Staying undefeated, going to move up the rankings a little bit. A lot of teams lost that were ranked ahead of Marshall. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But speaking of Grant Wells, I mean, it's grade time. What do you got for Wells this week? I know he had – I mean, if you look at the stat line, really the only thing that jumps out at you in a negative way is 2 interceptions, and we keep talking about 1 at the end of the half. Just didn't matter. So it was 1 bad throw, but he still put up 250 and 2 touches. So what do you got for Wells this week?
Yeah, I'm going to give Grant Wells a B this week. I thought it was a good performance. Honestly, overall, it was a good performance, or at least pretty good. I mean, 18 of 31 is a pretty good completion percentage. That'll get the job done most games. 251 yards, that's a good day there. 2 touchdowns, like we said, the 2 picks. 1 pick was just flat out a bad throw and a bad triple coverage. And the other one, like you said, was at the end of the first half, so it really doesn't even matter. A 63.4 QBR, that's not outstanding, but that's still serviceable. And one thing I noticed with him a lot in this game and other games too is he had a really nice deep throws that were nearly completed, but they just the receivers just couldn't quite come up with them. So like he was on the money on a lot of those throws that he missed. So like I mean that's the thing with him is that even a lot of times when the passes aren't completed, he's still pretty much on the money with the throws. I mean a little bit up and down, but I mean like you said, he always. Well, I said this to my friend at the game yesterday. That every time that he has adversity or he throws an interception or does something bad, he bounces right back. And that was exactly what he did yesterday. I mean, FAU went up 9-7 there. What happens in the next drive? 4 plays, they're in the end zone. And he has a long touchdown throw to R.D. Henry. So Grant Wells doing more of the same stuff. A little bit up and down, but, I mean, you expect that out of a freshman. So overall B.
Yeah, overall B. And let's look. It seems like we are still losing sight of the fact that he's only played 5 games. He's still doing really well. So it seems like we've been in the midst of the Grant Wells era for a long time and just seen a lot of good football, but he's played 5 games. All right, so moving along to the offense, 385 yards total offense. Couldn't stay on the field for over 50% of the game, which is a little bit of an anomaly for Marshall this year, but it is what it is. They still managed to get the win. And even, like you said, an average offensive performance still puts up 20. Okay, we'll take that. It's still a win. 5-0, 3-0 is the only thing that matters at the end of the day. So what do you got for the offense?
Yeah, I have a B for the offense. I mean, it was not great, but it certainly was not bad. I would have liked to have seen a few more of those drives capitalized. They settled for field goals a couple times, and usually when they get in the red zone this year, they've been punched into the end zone. So I'd like to see that come back in the next few weeks. But I mean, looking at it, I mean, they scored 20 points, which is okay. They had 385 total yards. I mean, you would think if you just looked at the total yardage that they probably put up in the 30s in this game, but they really should have put up 30 in the 30s in this game. They just, like I said, had a couple drives come up short. So, that is what it is. 251 passing yards, 134 rushing isn't like a huge number, but it was still 4.5 yards per carry, and they did not run the ball nearly as much in this game as they had been doing. 8.1 yards per pass. Like I said, 4.5 yards a rush. Only 5 of 13 on third downs. That's a big difference compared to going 13 of 16 the week before. But I mean, you're not going to go 13 of 16 hardly ever on third downs. But even on the season, they were like 50+% on third downs. So like that was lower than that. So they need to get back going again. A couple turnovers. One was legit. One wasn't, like we said. Settled for field goals a couple times. Red zone drive, in the red zone, they didn't quite punch it in like they had been doing. And I know that's something they're going to work on heavily, I would imagine. I mean, the red zone offense has been stellar this year. I mean, and they still scored a couple. I mean, even when they were settling for field goals, that's still points, but you would like to see those being touchdowns like they had been most of the year. And then in the first half especially, they couldn't hold on to the ball at all offensively. FAU completely controlled the time of possession in the first half, and they ended up about Marshall, like I said, about -7 on the game. So that's very different compared to what they had been doing, where they were like +10, +11 minutes in time of possession. So they need to get that stuff worked out. But, I mean, it is just one game, so I'll give the offense a B.
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, it really is. They struggle with a lot of adversity on the offensive side of the ball in the first half. It was apparent. And then I tweeted that from the sound of the game, when Marshall came out at halftime, they looked like a refocused and determined team. And we started seeing the success that we had been seeing for all the season up to that point. So they just needed to get, smacked around them for a minute and shake the cobwebs off and then play herd football. And that's what they did. So how about the defense this week? Another stellar performance. Still no team has rushed for over 100 yards on this front seven. Stephen Gilmore for the second week gets in there and gets a sack. So, I mean, you see guys flying all around, and let's not forget they were shorthanded, down 3 safeties, one starter, 1 reserve safety, and then Pitts gets ejected in the second quarter. So, they had to do some things different. Some guys were thrust into action that normally probably wouldn't have played that many snaps. But, hey, solid effort, only gave up 9 points, blocked an extra point. I mean, hey, all those cool things. So what do you like about – or what do you got for the Herd defense?
Well, for the 5th straight game, it's at least an A+ for the defense. I'm giving them another A+. I thought they were spectacular again. I mean, being on the field for, about 34 minutes of the game or something like that, and then they only gave up 9 points. I mean, that's really good. I mean, yeah, FAU was shorthanded a bit, but that's still. But even with them being shorthanded, they were still playing well. So it's not like I said, it's not like they were just trotting out some bums. I mean, that's a team that's in Boca Raton, Florida, and they have, Willie Taggart as head coach who can recruit. So it's not like they're only, it's not like the only players they have are the starters. They have way more players than that they can throw in there. And the defense still had A-plus effort, only allowed 9 points. 234 total yards is really a good day. FAU was 7 of 17 on third downs, but I mean, that is still under 50%. So like the defense was honestly pretty good on third downs there. They only allowed 4.9 yards per pass. That's impressive. Marshall almost averaged more or as much rushing the ball offensively as they allowed passing the ball defensively. So that's a pretty big telling stat there. 2.3 yards per rush, dominated that. I mean, I don't remember what the total was. It wasn't in the 80 something total yards rushing, something like that. So 86. So I mean, the run defense is just playing out of their minds, honestly, so far. They had the one interception, really good interception by Brandon Drayton. He got both feet in bounds. Like that was a purposeful attempt too. He could have just settled for the 1 foot. He got both feet in bounds. Really nice interception there at the end of the first half. NFL type play there. Maybe that's what his mindset was. They were, like I said, they were on the field. I mentioned this earlier. They were on the field a lot longer than they were used to. They haven't hardly been on the field probably more than maybe at the most 25 minutes a game or something like that of game time. And it's pretty much 10 plus minutes more than that or close to it. So a lot longer on the field. But they had 5 sacks, 9 TFLs. I mean, the sacks, #grabbing sacks season is just going crazy right now. Like they are just grabbing sacks everywhere. 5, 6 sacks a game recently. You got to love that. That was one of my keys to victory was blitz, and they blitzed, and boy, did they make it work for them. So defense, I mean, like I said, like I'm going to keep saying it. We're running out of things to say about them because they've been so great. So A+ for the defense again.
I want to point out the fact that I'm glad the coaches listened to the podcast because I did not see any prevent defense this week, and it really became apparent that the success lies in bringing the pressure. What do you do? I mean, look, when you get cut badly and you're bleeding like crazy, what do? You apply pressure, and that's what stops. So it's the same thing basically in football. If you need to stop the bleeding, I mean, FAU really wasn't doing that much, but if you need to stop the bleeding, you apply pressure. I also want to point out the fact that Marshall was inches away from a defensive touchdown again this week. A ball that was talked about as being a potential lateral on the radio was scooped and picked up by Owen Porter and ran in for a touchdown. Ultimately was determined to be a forward pass, but this defense is just swarming. They're creating plays. The pressure is the key. Good things happen when the herd is bringing the pressure. Special teams this week, we haven't talked about it at all. I mean, you did a little bit talking about settling for field goals instead of touchdowns. Chuchi misses his first field goal attempt of the season, goes 2 of 3 on the day, 2 of 2 on extra points. I can't remember what that was. It was like 43-yard attempt or something like that he missed. Yeah. Ultimately doesn't matter, but that's, something that Marshall really in recent years isn't used to having happen. Really, they've been really, really solid on field goals and punts and kicks and kickoffs. So I know Doc didn't like that, but it happened and it didn't really affect the outcome of the game. So what do you got for special teams this week?
Yeah, I mean, they were okay this week overall, but I still wasn't overly impressed. So I just gave them a B-. I mean, there's a few things I didn't really like. I mean, the 2 of 3 on field goals. I mean, the one field goal, it was online. He just doesn't have the leg for it. He has to still, I mean, I don't know if that'll come with more practice or whatever, but he just doesn't have a very strong leg. But I mean, when he's within, 40 or 35, when he was within 35, 40 yards, he pretty much is money. It's just when he's over 40 yards, it was a 43, 44-yard field goal. He didn't even get it there. So, Marshall, like you said, Marshall's not used to seeing that. But, I think eventually that'll get worked out to an extent. I mean, he's not going to have a Justin Tucker leg or anything. But, eventually I'm sure that'll improve. But he did nail both his extra points. He hasn't missed an extra point yet this year. They only had one kickoff return in the game, and it was only a 15-yarder to Sheldon Evans. So, not really good there. But they did get that blocked extra point, which ended up being a pretty big deal because that allowed them to hold on to a 1-point lead a lot longer than, if it would have been tied. So they had the block extra point. Josh Ball on that, breaking through the line, and then I don't remember who blocked it, but that was a really good play. Lefevre was 40.5 yards per punt. Not necessarily a huge day for him, but I mean it was still good enough. And they did allow that one kickoff return that was kind of a long one. I think it was in the second half, the third or fourth. I think it was third quarter. They let them get out to about the 40 or something like that, and that kind of gave me shades of last year a little bit. But that was just one kick return. I mean, it wasn't that bad. So, I mean, special teams, there was a lot of up and downs, but, like, I don't know. There really wasn't anything outside of the blocked extra point that really stood out a whole lot positive for me. I mean, there were positives, but, like, that's the only thing that immediately comes to my mind as being a big positive. So I'll just say B-.
Fair enough. We see some things that hopefully will kind of go away. And if they all happened in this one game that still resulted in a win, so be it. I mean, if now we know kind of where the herd has to be in Chuchi's money range. And if that's where they have to be, then that's where they have to be. They know that now. So not a big deal. Kick coverage has been stellar all year. I don't expect that to start trending downward or falling off a cliff or anything. No. So I don't think there's really any cause for concern. And a bright note, Talik Keaton returned in this game. So Herd's got its primary punt returner back. I don't know that there was really any difference made in that area one way or the other, but just knowing that, an all-conference punt returner is back is a nice weapon to have back in the arsenal. All right, coaching this week. Look, FAU, for whatever reason, is a game that you want to win because they've been, pretty competitive. It's a tiebreaker you want to have. Marshall's had good success with beating them. Now we're back to the same scenario, Trace, is can they take care of their own business and not hand over an opportunity back to the second-place team in the East? So what do you got for the coaches, not only this week, but as we look forward, that the mindset that we're over the hump against FAU, we're halfway through the season, the picture's starting to become a little bit clearer.
Yeah, I mean, coaching was still solid. I'll give them a B+ this week. I mean, it wasn't like as great as it has been for a few different reasons. It seemed like early on, especially Marshall was kind of a little bit lackluster, didn't have quite a lot of energy early on. And I think I tweeted that during the game. And they just didn't seem like they were nearly as energetic early on. Maybe it was because it was a colder game and, it was back home and whatever. I don't know. But, it just seemed a little less energetic, even though you shouldn't be less energetic when you're at home. But I don't know. Maybe it had something to do with it. A little bit of a slower start. I mean, they did end up scoring first on that really nice touchdown to Brendan Knox. Little dump down pass he took to the house, just plowed over that guy at the goal line. God, that was a good play. But, I mean, so they scored first there, but it was still a little bit of a slower start. And even though they didn't run a quote-unquote prevent defense, I really did not like a lot of that soft coverage, the 10-yard cushions that they were playing, they were giving them. That's the only way FAU had any success through the air. That was literally it, was when Marshall was playing, 7, 8, 9, 10 yards off the ball. That was the only way FAU had any kind of success through the air. And it kind of made even less sense because they're giving them soft coverage and they know they can't go vertical on them. Like they know that quarterback can't make deep throws and they're still giving them those free yards. So I didn't really like that. And honestly, that's probably the only reason FAU was able to even score in this game was just because of that. So Marshall plays that a lot, but they seem like they played that a little too much in this game for my liking. They did have a big response though after trailing for the first time all year. Like we said, 4-play offensive drive. They finished the game strong, scored the last 13 points of the game unanswered. So good stuff there. They came out halftime, made adjustments, in-game adjustments. Like you said, FAU had nearly a month to prepare for this game. Even short-handed FAU still had advantages. They could scout Marshall a lot harder than Marshall's been able to scout FAU. So coaching was able to offset a lot of that. Defense, again, the game plan, even though I didn't like the soft coverage at times, they still played lights out. They sent the pressure. They got there. Coaching was still definitely solid. A couple things here and there I could kind of criticize, but for the most part, though, you can't argue with the result. So B+.
Yeah, B+. I got a question though. I've got to ask: if we see the success of all this pass rush, and we know that Marshall's got speed everywhere along the defensive line and in the linebackers. So you pretty much anybody you bring, they've got a really good chance of beating their guy and getting to the quarterback, or at least hurrying the quarterback along. Why is it that we do continue to see that big cushion? Why is it not try to jam a receiver at the line to get, that extra half a second for the pass rush to get there? Like you said, when they can't go vertical, it's just kind of weird to me, but hey, I don't get paid to coach football. Hell, I don't even get paid to talk about it through a microphone.
Yeah.
I just have fun watching it and then talking about it. So it's a lot easier for me to question folks and here's what I would have done when knowing good and well, I have no idea what I would have done. How about overall for the herd? I'm sorry, man. I didn't mean to. I just went off on a tangent.
No, I was just going to say it'd be one thing if they were going against Trevor Lawrence, but they weren't going against Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, that's true. So let's move along. What do you got for the herd overall this week? 20-9 victory, 5-0, 3-0 in conference. Cruising right along. I mean, I'm not going to say they're dominating, but they are plugging right along. It's just like show up, win next week. It doesn't have to be gorgeous. It doesn't have to be sexy. At the end of the day, you're already ranked. As long as you keep winning, you're going to keep rising. So what do you got for the herd overall against FAU?
Yeah, I was kind of torn between two grades. I almost went with a B, but then I thought, no, I'll just give them a B+, because I feel like a B+ is a little more fair, especially with how well the defense played. I mean, the offense had some issues that we've documented, but that was still a good enough offensive performance to where they could win the game. Should have put up way more points than they did, but they still had success offensively. They were able to move the ball a lot. Defense was on the field a lot longer than usual. They still held them to only 9 points. Really good stuff there. And I mean, even though FAU, like their fans, of course, are going to keep bringing up, but the only reason Marshall won because they were shorthanded, or the only reason, or the refs screwed them, or it's always the same excuses. But even if FAU was shorthanded, they were still coming in with the nation's third longest winning streak, FBS winning streak. They had won 8 straight games dating back to last year. So Marshall was able to end that. Marshall they're the only team that's beaten FAU in the last year. So, I mean, in last year. So, it was still a good win. It's always going to be a good win when you can beat, especially when they were, the defending conference champions. Anytime you defeat the defending conference champs, that's always going to be a good win, no matter what the circumstances are. Like we've said, there was things going against Marshall in this game, and there was things going against FAU in this game. So it's not like it was just a one-sided adversity type thing. So, I mean, good win. Now they're, 5-0, 3-0 in a conference is all that matters. They're just trying to keep winning, and that's all it's about. And they needed to try. They're great teams are going to have to find ways to win differently. They can't just be all going at, blowouts, just winning, going away. They have to be some different types of circumstances in these games that builds, like I said, team character and all that good stuff. And even all the great Marshall teams in the past have been dominant, have always had a couple games like this or more. So, I mean, good win. Got to be happy with it. So B+ overall.
B+ overall is fair. Marshall is just doing what they need to do. I'm not going to dissect everything, more than I really have to. There's no need to dive into how it could have been better, how it could have been sexier, because wins are just tough to come by. And when you can start stringing them together, you just got to appreciate them, and it's been a long time since Marshall has been able to be on the verge of potentially being really, really special. When you talk about 2014, which we always do, it was a special season. And now we're 6 years removed from that. So there has been an entire couple of classes, kids that started freshmen and have graduated that weren't a part of something like that, weren't a part of a championship team. So to have it back again in Huntington is something special. I know the fans love that. They expect it, but look, let's just keep one game at a time. That's the recipe that's working. And I hate to break in on your news a little bit. I don't know if you're looking at it yet. Yeah, you're looking at it. Amway coaches poll is out right now. Trace, you can go ahead and break the news, and then I'm going to get into one final segment before we do final thoughts. What is the herd up to in the Amway coaches poll, Trace?
Well, the coaches put Marshall at 18th this week, which is a little surprising because they were only 25th in it last week. I mean, yeah, we did talk about, or I don't know if we even talked about it besides pre-show, but a lot of teams ahead of Marshall lost. But, I mean, even at that, that's still a 7-spot jump, and Marshall didn't necessarily have the most impressive performance. So I was kind of surprised at that. Although the caveat to that is, of course, they're going to be 1 spot behind an 0-1 Penn State team. Of course, they're going to be ranked behind them. No. Hold that thought, because this makes even less sense now than it did before. Penn State
still ranked above Indiana?
is ranked above Indiana, and they just lost to Indiana. What in the name of all that is decent is wrong with that?
Yeah. Here's the thing. Marshall, there were a lot of teams. There were 4 teams ranked ahead of Marshall that lost in the poll. Well, this is in the AP. I don't know what they were ranked in the coaches poll, but SMU, Iowa State, Virginia Tech, and Minnesota all were ranked ahead of Marshall, and all lost. And Marshall made the second biggest jump in the poll this week, in the coaches poll this week, behind only Indiana, who went from not ranked all the way up to 19th, one spot behind the herd, a 32-team leap. I don't know that I agree with all that. I'm not saying Indiana's good or Indiana's bad, but, if you talked about this before, if you go ranking teams in the top 10 before the season, before they play a game, how do you really know how good they are? So Penn State was ranked like 6th or 7th, and they lost. So now all of a sudden you're going off the rationale that Indiana is better than Penn State, but maybe Penn State wasn't that daggone good. So yeah, I'm not trying to split hairs here, but what I'm saying is be fair about it. Brett McMurphy's been really one of the only ones that were ranking teams that have played games, and this is why, because you run into a scenario like this. So not only was Penn State probably overrated, Indiana's probably a little bit of a knee-jerk reaction too, and then you still rank Indiana behind Penn State. That's a little egregious. But look, the Herd's a top 20 team right now as far as the coaches are concerned, 18th in the country, third highest G5 program. Cincinnati's sitting there at number 7, BYU's sitting there at number 10, and then the Herd at 18. So fun times in Huntington. Last segment I'm going to get to before we do our well, we're not doing final thoughts because we're going to flip the script, take a break, and then preview FIU. So, look, I want to revisit my points to victory for FAU and see how the Herd did versus what I said they had to do. My number one point to victory was they had to dominate the line of scrimmage, and we didn't see that very much in the early part of the game. But like I said before, they came out at halftime and looked like a completely refocused team with a completely new mindset. They were more interested in the game and more motivated to get it done. So I'm going to call that a push. They didn't dominate it from beginning to end, but when it mattered, they did. Number 2, I said it had to be Knox, Evans, and the body blow offense. And again, we didn't see that be successful in the beginning, but in the late part of the game after Marshall had basically taken a lead. It wasn't a big lead, but they had a comfortable lead, and they needed to move the chains to just eat some clock away. We saw the Herd be able to do that. The 4th string FAU running back, Brendan Knox, was able to carry the chains a couple of times and basically ice that game away for the Herd. Number 3, I said the Herd defense had to set the edges and keep Nick Tronte honest, because coming into the game, he was the leading passer and leading rusher for FAU, and they did that. They harassed that dude all day long. We talked about how good the defense was again. We talked about how stellar they were against the run. So they absolutely were able to keep Tronte honest and keep him really not having any success of any importance. Number 4, I said they had to set up the death knell play, and they did that. You saw later at the end of the game, we saw the big passes start to hit again, just like we saw against Louisiana Tech. The big touchdown to Artie Henry was absolutely the death knell play that sealed that game away. And then it was just up to the guys to move the bodies and move the chains and stack the game away. Trace, all in all, it's a good game, good win, undefeated. So look, we're going to move right into this FIU preview because it's a short week for the Herd. They got to go down to Miami and play FIU on a Friday night affair in just 5 days from now. So hang with us on the other side of this break. We'll be back in here, and we're going to talk about the game against FIU. It's the Moonshine Throwdown Podcast. Unfortunately, on the other side of this break, you're not going to get an FIU Marshall preview because as I'm editing the show, literally news just broke that the game has been canceled. So unfortunately, this is just going to be a really weird, unplanned ending to this podcast. We had the whole thing recorded and ready to go, but now I'm stuck cutting it out and recording this weird thing that I didn't plan on having to do. So let's just take you out here. I hope you enjoyed the recap of Marshall and Florida Atlantic, but until we can get another game on the schedule or until FIU gets back somehow, go Herd, go Tops. It's the Moonshine Throwdown Podcast. Later.